support among evangelicals, because most evangelicals understand the Bible spends a lot of time talking about God's impartiality, about...
Okay, now, these are arguments that are supposed to be against us. In the context of this answer, these are arguments that are supposed to be against us. Anyone who has read the document knows that, once again, you are getting pure straw man politics from Russell Moore. Pure straw man politics. Because he was just saying, evangelicals, it hasn't gotten any traction, which it has, but it hasn't gotten any traction because evangelicals realize these things, which logically and rationally, if this was meant to be a logical, rational presentation, would be the assertion that these people don't. And anyone who's read the document knows that this is straw manning, okay? You know, here, oh, you about got hung up there. Straw manning, you know, I didn't bring it in, but there's straw man, and that's what you're getting, is we're going to misrepresent it, and it's like I'm listening to Tucker Carlson talk to, you know, he brings these wild-eyed leftists on. He had one last night, or the night before last, when I was listening. I forgot which one it was, but he was talking something about Russia or something, and it was hilarious. You just knew what he was going to say. He could not get out of the box he was in. You know, you just after a while you start figuring out this is what the left is all about. Well, this is what Russell Moore is doing. It's the exact same thing. It's just straw men are us. As long as my lips are moving, I'm saying something important here. Well, no, not if you're not accurately representing. And of course, let's take it out of the political realm. This is not how you're supposed to handle your fellow Christian believers. People who are ministers in churches, people who have extensive experience in teaching in seminaries, including Southern Baptist seminaries. This is not how you're supposed to do it. If you disagree with what they're saying, take apart their arguments. Address their arguments. Don't do the word, speech act stuff and all the rest of this stuff. Deal with what they've actually said and done. But that's not the narrative in Western culture today.
About the church being a reconciled community.
Who started long before the document ever saw the light of day talking about the nature of Christian unity? Providing half an hour long exegetical discussions from Colossians 3 or Ephesians 4. Have you heard anything? I've listened to Russell Moore's webcasts, and I'm just going to be perfectly straight up front. There is nothing in those webcasts that comes to a tenth of the level of exegesis that has been offered against this movement that he is helping to spearhead. Not a tenth. Not a tenth. There's been all sorts of, well, let's look at some Old Testament stories and make applications. Not, let's dig into the syntax and grammar of the Greek in Pauline texts that are specifically on the subject. No. We don't get that. Not from Russell Moore. It's just...
reconciled community across races and ethnicities, and about God's concern for justice in the public arena. And that the church has a responsibility to speak to the conscience. And so the sort of mentality here...
So the mentality here is the opposite of all that. That's a lie. Okay, I want to be straightforward here. That's an untruth. And given that Dr. Moore is an intelligent man and he has access to all the information, to misrepresent the intentions and words of someone else is to engage in a lie. I'm sorry, that's the only way to describe it. Unfortunately, in the politically charged atmosphere today, there is the concept that you can use untruths as long as it promotes the greater good of your entire movement. And that's the only explanation I can have here. Because to try to paint us as Jim Crow slave owners, as he's doing here, while misrepresenting the fact that the statement itself says so many of these things in regards to what justice is and how the scriptures speak to these. I don't even know how you do it. You just must assume that your audience is just never even going to check out what you're saying. It just must be the thinking. I don't know how else you get away with it.
Artificially divides what I do individually from what I do together with other people.
This is part of the meme. It is a false meme. There is nothing in the statement that divides what I do individually with what we do as a group. It does insist upon the fact that reconciliation is accomplished by the gospel, not by governmental entities. It does insist and therefore reject the insertion of extra biblical concepts such as oppressor, oppression, power dynamics, and all the other stuff that is a part of the elites today, but has nothing to do with a scriptural biblical worldview. So it rejects all that. That is far different than the false allegation being made by Russell Moore in these words.
The way that the Old and New Testaments simply do not.
My question.
Now, she sees through this. She lives in a world where she has to deal with people who fill a minute with verbiage without actually saying anything. So she sees through this.
I wonder because Vodi Bakum is one of the signers. I mean, he's an African American. I mean, he's a former football player, and he's a pretty good speaker around. So that's why I was confused about the race angle of this.
Well, I mean, that's primarily what we're talking about here. Is there a responsibility for the church to talk about not just personally and individually and in my heart do I have hatred toward other people, but also what's our responsibility to talk about those unique sorts of pressures and structures that exist within society that we might not even think about.
So that's the concept of systemic racism. What does that have to do with Vodi Bakum? You see, to actually answer the question that he was asked would require him to comment upon the consistency of what Vodi has said for years on this subject and how that's reflected in the wording of the statement itself. But he's not going to go there. He does not want to read a word from the statement because that might get people to actually go read it. That might get people to do something more than just accept his ipsa dixit in regards to what it's actually all about. So she's raised the question. He's not answering the question, and she's going to see that.
You think of what, for instance, James does with the church when he writes in and he talks about personal issues of sin. Guard your tongue. He also talks about some of you have hired workers in your fields that you are oppressing. God hears their cries, which is completely consistent with the Psalms, with the prophets, with Jesus himself.
Right. No, I totally understand, and I think.
But that has nothing to do with what I actually asked the question.
Being an African American myself, I do understand that some people of color get in a quagmire when they're talking about race because they've been so mistreated. Their lives have been, in almost this prison because they can never escape from their skin color, cannot escape from that, and so they've had to deal with the reality that you kind of live in a white world, and then that's hard. But from the history of my family and the history of other African-American families, we also know that has given us a certain strength, that have come out of this and it's okay. And so that's why I understood Vodi Bakum's inclusion in that list, because he says too many of our young people are starting to use it as an excuse not to succeed, not to study harder, not to, not blame anybody else for your downfall, and that has helped them succeed. And we kind of feel that sometimes white people don't get that. That if you give them an excuse, they're going to take the excuse, and this is a problem we see in young African Americans. So,
well, I don't think it's an either or to say you have personal.
Now, she just made a really good point, and it is a point, obviously, that Vodi does make and has made numerous times, and she's well aware of it. Maybe she saw the 2014 thing where it was him against an entire room full of social justice warriors, and he made these points. Is Moore going to recognize the validity of that point? Well, he's saying, well, it's not an either or, it's a both and. What is that supposed to mean? There is a consistency between the truth that she just enunciated, the truth that Vody has enunciated, that's the same truth, and the essence of the statement that he says he's disagreeing with. So he can't admit that. So he's got to go, well, yeah, but, and then immediately move on to something else.
To say you have personal responsibility, you also have to address an issue of impartiality and justice in the public arena. It's both of those two things together.
Right.
And so, of course, are you always going to have people who are going to simply blame the situations around them? Sure, you'll always have people in any arena that will do that. That doesn't mean that there are not genuine problems. I mean, the same thing.
But there are many in the black community that are recognizing. I mean, when you have a community that votes 95% the same direction, then you have groupthink going on. It's that groupthink that we are the oppressed, they are the oppressors, this divides us from everybody else, we can't get ahead, we are the only ethnic group that everybody has to get together to help us. And she's saying you have to get past that or you're never going to get anywhere. And that's what Vody's been saying. And that's what all sorts of black people are saying who think clearly on this subject, but it goes against the narrative. You're not allowed to say that. She's seen it. She hears it. She knows Vody's saying it. And she's asking him, so where's the disconnect here? Where's it coming from?
Applies when it comes to, say, abortion. I once heard okay,
and he goes off into some thing there. We've got other things to look at, but that was, again, why not talk to us about our statement? I mean, if we had already been given all the opportunity in the world to explain all this stuff, okay, I can understand talking to the opponents or something like that, but it seems like the only people that are getting any air are the opponents, rather than, I mean, but that's how the left works. That's how media works in the land today, big time.